Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome to How to Get Hired. I'm Bill, the company's expert. Thank you for joining me today. This is the weekly live stream where we talk about job interviews and hiring, job search, networking, resumes, cover letters, all that kind of stuff. The wonderful, beautiful world of being between jobs and trying to change that situation. And this is primarily a Q&A where you can ask me questions, and I will do my best to answer them and help you out. The title of today's episode of How to Get Hired is What is Your Weakness? How to Answer. Live Q&A. So we're going to be kicking things off by talking about how to answer the weakness question, the king of trick questions that you're going to encounter in some way, shape, or form in every job interview you go to. This is episode 125 of How to Get Hired. We've done 125. Well, we've actually done 124. This will be the 125th. So, and as always, a special shout out goes out to my YouTube channel members. Snap. Membership has its privileges. My Patreons, my super thanks donors, and of course to you, my participants. Thank you for being here. If you can see my face, you should be able to see a chat box somewhere in the vicinity, depending on what device you're watching this on. If you're watching it on a TV in your living room or something, you're just out of luck, because I don't think you can easily chat. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't watch YouTube on a TV as of yet. So if you can actually do that and write comments and send in questions, let me know. I'd be interested to know if that's possible. Let's dive into this. I see David is here. David wins the award for the first person in the chat today. So congratulations, David. And Abdullah or Mohammed says, hello, Mr. Bill. How's it going? It's going great. I'm in my element. I'm doing my live streams, and I get to interact with you guys. So that's great. There are a lot of people that are between jobs right now. And if that's you, I want you to know that this is one of the times in our lives where we feel the lowest. We feel about this tall. And it's never easy. Times like these are never easy. But what I can assure you of is that it is temporary, despite what it feels like. It is temporary. Okay, something's going to come along for you. But the better you understand what's going on and you understand your options and all that kind of stuff, the sooner it will happen. So that's what we're here to take care of. Okay, let's just dive in. Okay, so the weakness question, while we're waiting for people to get in the chat, there are 13 people here. Thank you for being here. While we're waiting for people to show up and to ask questions, let's talk about the job interview question, what is your weakness? Everybody loves this question, and by that I mean everybody hates this question. You are going to be asked this in some way, shape, or form at every job interview you go to. That's because, there are some questions where you want to be asked them because they give you the floor. They say, here, impress us, give us your pitch, make a case for yourself. Tell us what you can do, right? And those are good questions to be asked. Like, for example, why should we hire you? And it's like, let me tell you, I can do this, this, this. I know this, this, this. I have experience with this, this, this. And that's why I'm awesome. Those are great questions to be asked. This question falls under the category of questions you don't want to be asked because you are very much on the defensive. Okay, they're trying to find your faults, your flaws, okay? And what you're doing in a job interview in some way, shape, or form is you are giving a first impression. You are making a first impression for them. And the way you make a good first impression in terms of what you say is going to be saying positive things, talking about your successes, talking about all your capabilities, right? What you don't want to say that's not going to contribute to making a good first impression is talking about where you've screwed up, what you can't do, what you failed at, right? If you are introduced to a person, you don't know who this person is, right? But the first thing that you learn about them is that they're no good at this and they tried this and failed, and they got in trouble for doing this, what are you going to think of that person? You're not going to have a very good impression of them. You're not going to want to pick them over a bunch of other people to do something properly, right? So that's why this question is very dangerous, okay? Because they're going to be trying to peel back the layers and get the dirt on you, okay? So that's the framing of this question. That's why they're asking and why you're always going to encounter it. Because in interviews, they're not just going to accept your story that you're awesome. They're going to, even some of the more useless recruiters are going to be aware that, well, everybody paints a very positive picture of themselves, and we don't entirely believe that. They're probably leaving out a bunch of negative stuff. So what we're going to try and do is we're going to try and peel back the layers and try and see what that negative stuff is. Let's see if we can surface some of that. And then we have a better idea of who this candidate actually is, right? So that's why they're asking this question and several other negativity questions. And it's a trap, right? You want to handle it very carefully. Okay, so with all that said, let's see. How can we talk about this? The other thing you got to remember is that the job interview is essentially, in a sense, it's a sales pitch for you. They are talking to several other candidates. Usually the average is about 6, that they bring in for physical interviews, face-to-face interviews. In this day and age where more and more interviews are getting to be virtual, so you're doing them over like Zoom calls and things like this, that number is increasing because it's easier to do interviews with people, so they do more of them, right? So that number is growing beyond 6. So you're one of 6 or possibly 10 people they're talking to, and they have to decide between them, okay? That's the idea. So you're going to try and make as good of a first impression as possible, and that involves hiding as many of your flaws as possible in the interview, right? And even when they ask and they try and probe and try and get you to reveal things, you're going to resist that. Okay, so let's start with this. What do some people do when they get asked, what is your weakness? And you can get this question in different shapes and forms. They might not say, what is your weakness? They might say something like, what's something you're working on? Right? You see what I did there? It's the same question using different words, right? What are you currently working on about yourself? Something like that, right? What's something in your past that, you handled, but going forward, you'd probably want to handle better? There's many forms of this question. Learn to recognize it. It's all the same question. We always give the same answer, okay? What's the first thing that a lot of people do? They give an honest answer. The interviewer says, what's your weakness? And you say, well, to be honest with you, I've got a problem with slapping people, when people collaborate with me and they suggest that my work could be better, I tend to get upset and I tend to start slapping people, right? And I have gotten in trouble for that before. In fact, I once got fired for it, right? But in terms of the interests of honesty here, I think you should understand that because we're going to be working together for a long time, right? So they would give the honest answer, right? And the reaction you always get is the recruiter is going to be happy that you answered so honestly because now they see exactly what your flaws are. And your big reward for answering this question so fully and completely and honestly is that they eliminate you and they never call you back. So there you go. So that's one way that people answer this question. They give the honest answer. And as you can probably tell by my sarcastic tone, I do not recommend that you do this. Okay, it's a trap, and you just fell into the trap. Another version of this question, by the way, is saying something like, why wouldn't we hire you? Why shouldn't we hire you? Right? It's the same question as, what is your weakness? So, this is the issue. This is the problem. If you just sort of give them exactly what they claim they want, it usually results in being eliminated. So that's the problem with this question, why it's so tricky, okay? Now, what they're trying to do, what recruiters are trying to do, what their role is. Some people might think, okay, the recruiter is there to try and look at several candidates, put them all side by side, and then find the best candidate, the one who's going to outperform, the one that's going to be better at that job than any of the others, right? That's a logical way of looking at it, that you would think that that would be the recruiter's job. However, that is usually not the case. Usually what recruiters are tasked to do is not find the best candidate, but find the least risky candidate. Okay? It's not the same thing. Least risky is not the same thing as best, right? This is why they want to know if ever you've been fired from a previous job. Because the idea is that if you've been fired before, you have an increased likelihood of being fired from this job if they were to hire you, all things being equal. Just playing statistical probability. If you're the type of person that tends to get fired from jobs, then we can expect a higher likelihood you'll get fired from this job, right? So that's kind of one of the ways they think, right? So that candidate would be a riskier candidate. If you hired that candidate, if you selected them, there's a higher likelihood it wouldn't work out. Maybe they start, but after a couple of months, they end up getting let go for performance issues or some kind of personal issue, right? So that's why they ask questions like, like that, like why, have you ever been let go from a job? Why did you leave your last job? Things like that, right? And that's the same reasoning behind asking questions like this. What's your weakness? Because they're trying to determine if you're a high-risk candidate or not. So they're going to probe you for your faults, your flaws, right? And what better way to see if there's anything wrong with you than to just come out and ask you straight to your face, what's wrong with you? What is your weakness? And most candidates will simply tell them. So as silly as that is, and as obvious of a trap as it is, most candidates fall into it. They reveal their weakness. Their big reward is they don't move on in the hiring process. That's how this works. You got to love this, right? Beautiful, isn't it? Okay, so hopefully everybody understands what the problem is and why they ask this and what they're going for, okay? And what your goals should be. Now, having said all of that, okay, I'm going to reveal one more piece of the way recruiters are trained to think. The way they're trained to think is that past behavior is the best predictor of future behavior, okay? That's why they ask things like behavioral questions in job interviews. Behavioral questions are anything that starts with, tell me about a time. Tell me about a time you tried something and you failed, right? So you're giving a specific example, right? Tell me about a time you succeeded at something, right? They figure, okay, if you've done that in the past, then the likelihood is that if we hire you, you'll do that same exact thing here because that's how you behave, right? Okay, that's the principle behind these things, okay? So you got to be aware of that. Anytime in a job interview you reveal that you do a certain thing or you have done a certain thing, what they're going to do is they're going to assume that, oh, if we hire you, that's how you're going to behave. So you can't just bring up a story in your past as if it's an isolated incident and say, well, that was like this one-time only thing. I don't do that, and I'm not going to do that going forward. They're not going to believe you. They're trained to think that that's how you acted, that's how you're going to act. So that obviously also frames the type of things you should say in a job interview. Okay, what's the second thing people do when they get asked this question? What is your weakness? Okay, the first one was they give an honest answer. Usually that does not work out. Secondly, they give a kiss-off answer. Okay, so they say what they get asked, what is your weakness? And they say, oh, chocolate, or they may try to make a joke out of it. Doesn't work. That's recruiters don't ask this question to get a cheap laugh. They ask this question to get an answer, and they don't appreciate people, circumlocuting the question and refusing to answer it. Okay, people tend to not like that. So you have to give some kind of answer, right? Another kiss-off answer they give is, oh, I don't have any weaknesses. I'm perfect in every way, as you can tell from my looks. That doesn't fly either, right? They're going to regard that as a hostile answer. You're not actually answering the question. You're obfuscating it. You're shutting it down. You're going around it. That doesn't help me. I'm asking the question to get an answer, not some kind of kiss-off, right? What's another thing people say as a kiss-off answer? They give a strength as a weakness, right? They say, oh, I'm just too nice. That's always been my weakness. I'm just such a nice person that, it hurts. It harms me that I give so much to others, right? Or like I'm just, I work too hard, or I just care too much. Those kind of things. The strength is a weakness thing. You see, like I've said before, recruiters, they are professionals at doing job interviews. This might be however many interviews you might have done in your lifetime, multiply it by 100, and that's how much interviews they've done. Okay, so this isn't their first trip around the block. They've heard that answer before, and they know what it is. They understand that it's a kiss-off. You're trying to not say anything. You're not answering the question. So that's how they're going to regard it in the vast majority of situations. So you can't say that either. Okay, so these are all common kiss-off type answers where you want to avoid giving an answer at all. Giving a seemingly legitimate answer, it usually doesn't go well. Okay, they don't like that. Okay, so that's where we come to what we should say. Okay, we can't do all of these things that I've explained. We understand the situation now. We have to give them a seemingly legitimate answer. The only problem is, paradoxically, it can't reveal anything negative about us, because that would be grounds for them to eliminate us. That's the challenge we're up against here. That's what's going on here. If you look at this from the perspective of the recruiter, what they're doing is their job is actually an elimination game. Because when they post a job or when they try and recruit, they get all kinds of applicants, right? And in this day and age, if they're doing it online with a posted job, they get hundreds and hundreds of applicants. Sometimes 800, sometimes 1,000. Now, they have to filter all those, whittle down 1,000 to about 10 or so people that they're going to bring in for an interview. So they've already done a pretty extensive filter, and they've brought in 10 or so people that they're doing real or virtual interviews with that all meet the technical requirements of the role on paper. Okay? It doesn't make any sense to bring in people that are not technically qualified to do the job for an interview. What would be the point of talking to those people? Even if you really like them and they pass the interview with flying colors, they still can't do the job. They're not qualified to it. So you can't hire them anyway. So what would be the point? So the what's happened is that they've gone from 1,000 applicants or whatever all the way down to 10, and you're one of them, but all 10 are all qualified to do the job as far as they're concerned. Okay? So now you've got to decide between them, and it's an elimination game. You're going to have to eliminate 9 of those 10 by the end of this process and offer the job to the one winner. Okay? So it's an elimination game. Now, if they're talking to 10 people thinking that they have to eliminate 9 of them, they're going to be very conscious of red flags, because any red flag that you you give them, is going to be grounds for them to just eliminate you outright. And this question is a minefield, because if you give them a red flag in answering this question, they're going to use it to eliminate you. Okay? So you have to give an answer that's seemingly an answer to the question. It gives them something legitimate, but yet it doesn't give them that red flag that they can use to eliminate you, because this is a real flaw. Okay? So after all this, I've put the problem in perspective. Let's get to how do you actually answer this. Okay. Here's what I recommend. And it's actually not originally from me. This is actually from a super high-level executive recruiter I worked with over 10 years ago who coached me in all this when I was getting hired. And, I've adopted this ever since, and I've recommended it to students and people on my YouTube channel, and it goes down really well. Now, here's what you do. You're going to give a trade-off, okay? And a trade-off, at least the way I define it, are two things that kind of go like this, right? Okay? What are some great examples of a trade-off? Think of like speed versus quality, okay? In doing a job, you could do your job really, really well, okay? Where you don't make mistakes at all. It's perfect. The only problem is that usually takes a bit of time, right? If you were to cut corners and do it faster, you would be able to do it faster, but the quality of the job goes down, right? So speed goes up, quality goes down. If you take your more trouble into doing it well and verifying everything, the quality goes up, but the speed goes down. So that's what I mean by a trade-off, okay? Two things that are inversely proportional, okay? This is going to frame your answer to the weakness question. You're going to basically give a trade-off, okay? You're going to give a understandable side effect of a strength of something you do that's awesome, okay? So for example, if you said, taking that example, if you said like, okay, look, I'm not the fastest worker, but I'm the one that produces the best results. I take the trouble to verify everything I do to make sure that everything is done by the book. It's been checked out. I followed all the procedures and I verified it. Okay, so I tend to produce very good results. The problem is that it takes me a little extra time to do this. Others may cut corners. Others may, not take shortcuts. They may not follow the official procedure, or they may not verify, and they're done quicker. So they're faster than I am. That's my weakness. But it's because I produce the best quality results, right? So think of a trade-off, something that's accurate for you. I can give several examples of this. I mean, you could talk about, we talked about speed versus accuracy, right, as a trade-off. You could talk about another one that I've talked about is like focus versus communication. So for example, you go to work, you don't talk to anybody, you just do your work, right? You don't stand at the water cooler and chat with people. You do your job, right? You work really hard. And that's good. You produce a lot of work. You're very productive. However, it may not be the best thing to cultivate strong working relationships with your coworkers and other people, right? In the environment. You're not very social, right? So nobody knows you, nobody likes you because you never have time for them, right? On the other hand, you could be a social butterfly. You could like always be away from your office or your desk or your workstation. You could be out chatting to people, right? And everybody knows you, everybody loves you. You've got very strong working relationships with everybody in the workplace, but you don't do that much actual work, right? So it's like a trade-off, right? Socialize versus work, right? So the way I labeled that was communication versus focus, right? Whatever, right? There's another trade-off. Okay, I'm going to give you a third one, just to give you some examples of this, and you can come up with some that apply to you. Okay? Adherence to directives versus a lack of flexibility. Okay? So someone who always follows their instructions to the letter and is very rigid, but yet they appear inflexible. You can't adapt to situations. You can't change your instructions based on a new developing situation, right? Some people are, they follow orders to the letter and they're very rigid. On the other hand, you get people that are much more adaptable, much more flexible. They don't do exactly what they're told, but they tend to adapt better, right? So it goes like that, okay? So those are some examples of trade-offs, right? And you need to pick one trade-off that applies to you. You do a certain thing, but it can lead to an understandable side effect, right? You do this great thing that has this slightly negative consequence, but it's totally understandable, right? Okay? Now, how you answer the weakness question, you're going to give the trade-off. You're going to say, well, I do this thing. Here's my weakness, is this. For example, the last thing I mentioned was adherence to directives versus flexibility. Okay? So, if you're the type of person that always follows your work instructions to the letter. Okay, your boss says to do this, you do that, right? Sometimes, as we all know, the boss gives instructions, but then the situation changes, right? Okay, but you don't care. You're told to do this, and damn it, you're going to do that, right? Okay, so you can always rely on me. I do what you tell me to do, right? The problem is, my weakness is sometimes I can be a little inflexible. In a changing situation, perhaps between the time that my instructions were given to me and the situation unfolded, maybe things have changed, right? So I can be a little inflexible. But the way I see it is that, whatever you tell me to do, you can rest assured that I always do it exactly the way you said, right? So that's like the trade-off. I can be a little inflexible, but it's because I believe that blah, 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 I always do things the way you tell me, and that way you can always rest assured that you know what I'm doing. Okay? So that's going to be the core of your answer. You're going to give a weakness that's an understandable side effect of something awesome that you do. Okay? Now, is that your entire answer? It can be, but I would go a step further and add something else to it. Something that's going to be the icing on the cake. Okay? And that is what you're going to do is you're going to say one other thing afterwards. Now, you basically gave a weakness, right? You gave a negative side effect of something you do that's awesome. You're now going to end by saying what specifically you do to make sure that that side effect, that weakness, never ends up being an issue. Okay? So an example of that in the case of the whole, flexibility versus, adherence to directives. You start off by saying, well, I can be a little inflexible from time to time. But this is only because I believe in following the letter of the instructions that the boss has given me to do. And I take pride in this. And I make sure that, if you tell me to do something, it's done exactly the way you tell me. You never have to worry that I've gone and done something else. Maybe somebody gave me some conflicting instructions, so I went and did something else instead. No, you tell me to do something, I do it. Now, what I do to make sure that this inflexibility or perceived inflexibility never ends up being an issue is I always verify back with my boss if the situation is different from what I was expecting. So if they give me an instruction, I go and do it, right? But if it really seems like there's been a change in the situation since I've been given those instructions, I always verify to make sure that's still what you want me to do. And that way, this perceived inflexibility never ends up being a problem. Right? So that's an example of how I would say you answer. You give a trade-off. You give a side effect of something you do that's awesome as your weakness, right? Which is a total understandable thing. They can't really eliminate you for it because it's quite understandable. It's a side effect of something you do that's awesome. But then, just to make sure that it doesn't lead to any issues or red flags, you then say what extra thing you do to make sure that side effect never ends up being an issue, ever. That's how I recommend you answer. Now, just to go one step further and just wrap this up, why do I say to do that? Because, number one, they can't eliminate you from what you said. Number two, you've given a legitimate answer to the question. Okay, you haven't deflected it or refused to answer it. You've given something real. And thirdly, what you've actually done is you've used this question, which is normally a trap and an ambush. You've used this question as a platform to say two awesome things that you do. Right? And that's why I recommend you answer that way. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. That's what I got to say about this. Let's open this up to questions. I see there's 43 people here. Get in the chat. I know some people were kind of in the chat earlier, but then they were kind of backing out of it because I was halfway through this little monologue. This is the problem with this question. There's a lot to it. It's not something I can just explain in 2 minutes, unfortunately. But if you follow that stuff for the weakness question, it will never eliminate you ever again in a job interview. So there you go. So I'm done with my monologue. So let's open it up to questions. Once again, if you want to go, I don't think I've actually said this so far, but if you want to go deeper with my stuff, you are confused about what to do, check out that course right there. That's all my advice, all in one place. How to get jobs in the posted job market and go through recruiters and job interviews. Also, how to get jobs in the hidden job market. That's where the vast majority of jobs are. And that's more of the sort of networking, social networking, that kind of thing. That route that exposes a ton of amazing opportunities for people. So if you're looking for that stuff, that's where it is for me. Link in the description. Okay, Saul is here. Saul says, I have an upcoming interview. I believe you described the answer perfectly. Okay, great, good. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, one extra bonus little thing I'll say about it, and I've already said this in videos, but an example answer for what is your weakness is you could say, well, they say, what is your weakness? And you could say, something like, to follow my formula, it would sound something like this. You could say, I have very high standards, but unfortunately, not everybody else that I work with shares those standards. But what I've learned is that with a little good communication with people, I can smooth that over. So if there's ever any conflict with that, I can smooth it over using some good communication, and it never becomes an issue. Right? So that's an example of that formula. I have very high standards. Not everybody shares those standards. That can sometimes lead to conflict. But what I've learned is that with a little communication, I go and speak to the person, we work it out, I can smooth all the conflict over, and it never ends up being an issue. So there you go. You've said 2 things, awesome things that you do in response to that question. You haven't really given them anything real that would make them concerned that they might eliminate you for that. There you go. Well, thank you, Saul. I'm glad that's working for you. But I'd encourage you, to come up with something that's using that formula that describes you. Like, you want to say something legitimate, right? You never know if they might want to go deeper, or they might want to bring you back for a second interview and ask you the same question again. So it's always good to say something legitimate rather than just sort of a canned, memorized answer that may not necessarily apply to you. You know what I'm saying? Some people like to give out sort of like, here, say this, and it's like, a whole paragraph, I'm just giving you the formula, and I'd encourage you to come up with something that fits the formula that describes you at the same time. So there you go. So get in the chat. I'm here to answer questions. Now that I've answered the question, most people are leaving. But you can ask me anything to do with careers, job search, job interviews, resumes, cover letters, networking, all that kind of stuff. Whatever you're having an issue with, whatever you're wondering about, whatever you're struggling with, let's get into it. Saul says, right, I have an example in mind that I will use, something along the lines of, I, along with others in my team, may approach an incident differently. Okay. Yeah, and that's a good point. Like, the more, if you're dealing with an intelligent recruiter, like, the more legitimate things you talk about that are like real issues are good. If you're dealing with a intelligent, reasonable hiring manager, they will want to hear that stuff. They will not want to hear empty platitudes or cliches. They will want to hear like a realistic issue that a lot of people struggle with, and what your take is on it, how you handle it, So also says, I'll use your communication explanation approach. Okay, fair enough. If that describes you, if that's something that you feel is your weakness, sure. Sophia says, how can I convince the company for profile to need a fluent way to speak? I'm in the level B1. I'm not sure what that is, but I'm really eager to learn more in the occupation. Okay, are you talking about, like, it sounds like you're talking about like a language kind of thing? Like, how can I convince them that I can communicate in this language, or that I'm fluent in that language? Now you've got to explain to me where you're at. Do you have an interview coming up, or are you talking about you don't have an interview, you're sending in an application and you want to try and convince them that, communicating in this language is not going to be an issue for me, right? So if you're at that stage, you haven't gotten an interview yet, then what I would say is that you're going to have some form of cover letter. If you're, for example, if you're submitting an application over email to a recruiter, like usually, you send an email with your resume attached, and in the body of the email, it says like, hello, please find attached my resume. It's for this job, and this is, why I think you should read my resume, and I look forward to hearing back, that kind of thing. You could say it right there, have a couple of bullet points, right? Just in point form. Say, I'm applying for this job. I'm very excited about it because, and then a lot of their requirements that they said that they're looking for someone with these requirements, you can list those. You can say, I have this, and I have that, and I have this, and I'm fluent in this language, or whatever it is, something like that. Does that make sense? Now, if you're at the interview, I don't think there's anything special you have to say or do to try and convince somebody if you're fluent in a language. Presumably it's the language you're communicating in, like that you're speaking, right? And they can tell, right? So I don't know if any of this is useful, Sophia. You have to perhaps give me a bit more details of what your situation is, and I'd be able to help you a little bit better. But hopefully that makes sense. PJ says, TikTok is blowing up. Is that supposed to be TikTok? Is blowing up, sharing personal stories of LinkedIn not being a good place to apply for jobs with so many people applying for the same positions. Yeah, that's why I've never encouraged people to apply for jobs on LinkedIn. The same is true of Indeed. The same is true of any place that everybody's using, because it's very competitive. And if you go through the front door with 500 other people, it's hard to elevate yourself above the crowd. A couple of sort of principles that are out there, right, is that, first of all, jobs that are posted publicly, they tend to get hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of applicants, right? Because it's so easy to apply for jobs. The easier it is to apply for the job, the more applicants that company gets, or that organization gets for that role, right? So that's what the double-edged sword is. That's why, incidentally, we see some organizations making the application process very lengthy and demanding, and one of the reasons for doing that is it's intentional to make it like hard and lengthy, and you got to put in all this time and work just to apply for the job. They're doing that intentionally because, instead of getting like 900 applicants, now it's going to go down to 200, right? And the assumption is that those 200 that they got, these are going to be people that care a bit more about actually getting that job, because they're putting up with this very troublesome, lengthy, application process to get it, right? All the casual people that are just applying for every job they see, and they're not even tailoring their resume or anything, they're going to be turned off by that process, and they won't get to the end of it, right? So this is the problem. You do what everyone else is doing. You all get put on a level playing field. They compare you all side by side with hundreds of other people. It's very hard to win out like that. This is why what I recommend, and I always have, is especially for younger people or people that are relatively new to job search. They haven't done a lot of job search in their lifetimes, or people that are just starting out in their careers. What I recommend is that you turn on to the way that most people get hired across the board, which is networking. And you get turned on to that earlier and learn about that. Most people wait till at least halfway through their careers to really tap networking to get hired, okay? And they're going to get hired not usually for the posted jobs. They're going to get hired for the hidden jobs, and there's many more hidden jobs than there are posted jobs. Something like all the jobs you see that are posted, it's something like 20% of all the jobs that are out there. The other 80% you're not seeing. They're there, and you can get them. It's just that they're not advertised, they're not posted publicly. Okay, how do you get those? The short answer is networking. And even if you know nobody, even if you are a total introvert like me, you can get those if you know how, right? So that's what I encourage people to look. So yeah, I never encourage people to apply for jobs on LinkedIn. What I've always done is I've encouraged people to use LinkedIn as a tool for doing things like direct outreach to employers, and for other things like getting informational interviews, stuff like that, which can lead to getting hired. Those are much more promising. But the problem is that a lot of people are never taught this kind of stuff in high school or anywhere afterwards, because you're not following a system. It's like you're learning the rules of society and the rules of people, right? For example, you have the right to go and talk to anyone you want, right? And most people live in a free country where they can do this, right? I'm in Canada. Whether you're in the Canada or the US or the EU or wherever you are around the world, it's a free country. You can go talk to anyone you want. You can send anyone a message, right? And you can say what you like, right? The problem is that a lot of people have been conditioned that they think like, oh, who am I to talk to that person, right? The problem is people who can hire you tend to be a level or more above you, right? But a lot of people don't know how to talk to those people. They don't know what to say. They don't know the channel over which to go. How would I talk to them? How would I communicate with them? Right? They don't know all this. They've never been taught this, right? So all I'm advocating is you go and learn this. Now, before I get to all the questions, if you want to learn this with me, check out that course. That's where I put all this stuff. I do have some free stuff on my YouTube channel, but the vast majority of it, all the detailed stuff, is here. So check out that course if you're wanting to learn that. Now, let's get to you guys here. Okay, so that was PJ talking about TikTok there. That's what I was responding to. PJ says, are we going back to it's who you know? No, that's not what I'm saying. You don't have to know a single person. You can arrive in a city. You can move to a city and do direct outreach to all the employers around you and get hired pretty damn quickly for a pretty awesome position that you wouldn't have found in the posted job market by doing things like direct outreach. If you want to know what that looks like, okay, I have a video linked in the description box to one of my videos where I show you what that looks like, how you do that. It's called, what's it called? It's called How Successful People Get Jobs. Okay, so check that out if you want to see, if you're interested in that. It's never been about who you know necessarily. The idea is that you go and meet the person, they now know who you are, and then you become someone that they will consider for a hidden job if they have a hidden job. That's the idea. Okay. Saul says, what alternatives do you suggest one can look at? if LinkedIn isn't it. Well, listen, you have two choices. You got the posted job market, you got the hidden job market. 80% of the jobs are in the hidden job market. If you want to apply for things on the posted job market, it's all the same. Whether you're doing LinkedIn, whether you're doing ZipRecruiter, whether you're doing Monster or whatever other ancient things are there, whether you're doing Indeed, it's all the same. It's where everybody is looking. So something like 80% of all job applicants are all competing for those 20% of the jobs that are posted. That's why it's so damn competitive and it's so tough, right? Now, the hidden jobs, I'm just saying, don't shoot the messenger, and I encourage you not to take my word for any of this if this sounds weird or new. Go and do your own research, okay? I'm trying to get you to also go and think and learn some stuff. So get your advice from a variety of sources. Go do your own research on this, okay? It's to your benefit. Something like 80% of the job applicants are competing for those 20% of jobs that are posted. So that's why it's very competitive. That's why each job has hundreds of applicants. When you apply for a job that's hidden, okay, you have maybe 2 or 3, if that, other people applying for it, like that are in the running, you know? So it's much less competitive, right? So it's all the same, you know, like I'm not going to recommend this website over that website. It's all the same, whether it's LinkedIn, Indeed. You wait a couple years, it'll be a new one, you know? Right? Some people use Twitter X. They use X. You know, they follow HR companies in their hometown that do recruiting for like a variety of clients. You know, they're always posting their latest, job postings that they're recruiting for. So you're following like maybe 50 of those companies in your hometown, and they're constantly feeding you all the jobs that they've just posted that they're recruiting for on behalf of some other company. You know what I mean? Like there's many ways of doing it, but they're all in the posted job market, right? So once again, you're going in with hundreds of other people. It's always the same. And their process is the same. Like I said earlier in this stream, recruiters are not looking for the best candidate. They're looking for the least risky candidate. That's a different thing, right? So if you have a work gap, that's going to be a problem for these people. If you haven't done this thing your entire life, that's going to be a problem for them. If you've never done that exact role before, that's going to be a problem for them, right? If you ever were let go from a job in the past, in any of your past, that's going to be a problem for these people, right? If you're changing careers, that's going to be a problem to the point of it's practically impossible to change careers by going through a recruiter, right? That's why when you're changing careers or you have a major work gap, usually, you know, that you can't explain away, that's why you have to go to the hidden job market to get past those things. Alexis says, I applied at a diner for a server position, but it's been difficult getting a response. Walked in on Monday and gave my number again. They keep saying they'll call. Should I just keep calling and waiting? I'd do it in person, you know, like, I don't know much about getting hired as a server, in like a restaurant or whatever. But I think most people are going to get hired if they apply in person. You want to see who the person is. Anybody can sort of be a server, but not everybody can be someone that's easy to work with and very charismatic and very pleasant to deal with, and has great communication skills and all this kind of stuff. So seeing that up front when the person applies is a huge advantage. So I would recommend doing it in person. Is it more work? Of course. But that's why most people don't do it. And therefore, it's a window of opportunity for you. Because how many people applied in person? If maybe 200 applied online, how many applied in person? 10? 20? You're going to be one of those 10 or one of those 20. You're not going to be one of 200. You know what I mean? So already your odds of getting it go up, right? Okay, ProSun says, Sir, I am from India. Your videos help me a lot to prepare myself to face the tough interviews. Well, good. Thanks a lot for your videos. You're absolutely welcome, ProSun. Thank you for saying so. Saul says, Saul's talking to Alexis. Sufia says, in the interview, they're telling me if I have a call with a client and I didn't understand him, how do you deal with that? Well, that's a problem, Sufia. It's a problem. If you can't understand, if there's communication issues, what you would ideally do is fix the communication issues, like learn that language a little better, or at least the way it's used in this particular role, use it, like fix it, and then it won't be an issue. Then they can, however much they probe you to try and, see if that's going to be an issue, they won't find anything because it won't actually be a problem. You know what I mean? That's what I'd recommend. I understand that may not be practical in all situations, but because I know so little of your situation, it's hard for me to suggest a very specific thing you should do that will help. You know what I mean? Just the basics of communication is asking people to repeat themselves, right? And then once they've possibly repeated themselves once, so that they've said their thing twice, you then repeat it back to them, what you understood, and ask them, is that accurate? So that if you didn't quite understand what they were saying, they then can correct you and say, no, I meant like this. And you say, okay, now I understand, right? So that can help with communication issues. You ask people to repeat maybe once, and then what you understood, you repeat that back to them to say, is that what you wanted, right? This is sort of like the basics of like communication with people, right? And that way you don't misunderstand them. That it gives you two opportunities to fix your understanding of them and have them restate what they mean so that it's clear. Okay, so I'm not sure if that applies in your situation, but that's kind of the basics of these things. Okay, where did I leave off here? Alexis is talking to Saul. Alexis says, it does seem like the job market is extremely nepotistic, and who is that why advocating networking doesn't seem to be fair? No, absolutely not. That's not what I'm saying at all. And you misunderstand people. Let me ask you something. Like, listen, I'm going to say this one thing in a last attempt to get you to understand this, okay? You want to, and maybe you've heard this if you listen to my live streams before. You want to move your home, right? You're in an apartment, you want to move to another apartment. You've got a ton of heavy furniture and personal belongings. You can't move them physically yourself. You need to get a couple of people to help you, right? Now, let's say you're in a new city, you don't have any friends and family, you have to essentially hire someone to do it, right? They're going to be moving all your personal stuff, so, lots of sentimental valued items, right? They're going to be moving all your personal valuables, right? If a couple of items went missing, you probably wouldn't notice in the chaos of moving, right? So who would you get? Would you get a friend to help you with that, even if you had to pay your friend? Or would you rather get a stranger? You don't know who this person is. They need money. They're offering to help you move. Who would you rather get? Right? Most people will say, I'd rather get my friend. Now, why is that? Is that because they're better at moving heavy things? No. It's because you trust them. You know them. They're a known quantity. You know they're not crazy. You know they're not a criminal. You know that they're not a pathological liar. You know that they're not a kleptomaniac. You know that they haven't falsified every single thing on their resume that you know about them, right? That's why you hire the person you know, right? It's not this conspiracy theory. It's that when you have something very important, that if you get the wrong person and you put them in charge and they screw it up, it's very bad for you, you want the right person, right? So yes, it's about ability, definitely. But the thing that nobody mentions is it's about trust, right? That's why companies don't hire CEOs. by putting an ad in the paper or an ad on the internet saying, we need a CEO, send in your resume, right? Because I don't care how brilliant you are. I don't know you. Nobody that I've worked with knows you. You could be lying about every single thing. I'm not going to entrust you with essentially this thing that's worth millions of dollars of my money. Like that's my entire retirement, my entire, like everything I'm going to give to my kids, like everything. I'm not going to entrust it all to you. I don't know who the hell you are, right? You know what I mean? It's about trust. So if you're hiring strangers, you're usually hiring at the bottom level, like the worker level, right? As people progress in their careers, it's more about them having proven themselves, right? If you've worked with them before, they're good. Great. If you haven't worked with them personally, but you know a lot of other people in your industry that they're all the leaders of your industry, they're all people you've dealt with, and maybe they've worked with this person and they've told you, yeah, they're pretty good. I've worked with them for 10 years and they're good. It's like, okay. Now they seem less of a risk, right? So it's not like when you say nepotism, that's not what's going on here. That's not what this is. It's just simply trust, right? It's hard to trust a stranger, especially when there's incentives for the stranger to lie because they need money, And this is the situation that a lot of employers are in, right? That's why they don't believe you when you say stuff in job interviews, So how do you get around this? You go and you meet these people, you connect with them before, not even knowing if they have a job, right? And if you're doing direct outreach, the idea is that just like job interviews, you just blast your resume out there and most people won't call you back, right? But some of them will, right? With direct outreach, you sort of like reach out to like every possible employer in your town that could hire you. And most of them won't be hiring right now, but some of them will. And they'll be hiring for something that isn't posted because most jobs are not posted. And if they are, and you're qualified and you land in their lap right at the exact coincidentally the right time, then there might be a job in there for you. That's the idea. Okay. Mike G says, I had recruiters reach out to me on LinkedIn for jobs. Most of them are contract positions. Okay. Saul says, yeah, I will be checking it out. Okay, good. Tran says, what do you think about apprenticeship? What do I think about it? It's a thing. It's legitimate. There's a legitimate need for it. It's appropriate in certain situations, certain professions. It's not appropriate in every profession or every situation. That's what I think about it. Prosun says, sir, how can I get information about the hidden jobs? Okay, so in this live stream, in the description box just below my video feed that you're watching me on here, in the description box, I've put links to several resources. And there's one video of mine, one of my own videos that I've put a link to. It's called Hidden Job Market. Follow the link, watch that video. If you want to go deeper, I mentioned this already like 20 minutes ago, but there's another video called How Successful People Get Jobs. Follow that link, watch that video. Okay, that'll answer that question for you. And then do your own research. Go and learn about hidden jobs. What are they? Go on ChatGPT, go on, Google, go on everywhere you can on the internet, and then, start trying things. Like learn by doing rather than just by listening to advice. Get some advice and then try and do stuff. Once you've done something, nobody can tell you it's impossible to do that, Nicole says, I like to understand the big picture in order to maximize outcomes, but sometimes information isn't forthcoming due to misunderstanding. My wish to know more than basic. How can this be a strength? Well, that's a pretty general statement. It's not stupid. It's like if you wanting to know the overarching plan and the incentives, trying to understand things like incentive structure is always good because that can inform you about how to make any little decisions along the way of like what you should do, right? If you understand what the priorities are, what the intended outcome is, why those are the outcomes, yeah, I mean, it's very logical. How can this be a strength? Well, like for what I said, it helps you make all the little decisions along the way if you understand what the big picture is, right? You don't need to always keep coming back to your boss or whatever and saying, now, do you want this done this way or this way, right? Or then you go back and then do it. And then you come back and say, well, I've just been informed that option is no longer available. Would you prefer me to do option B or option C? Which would be better for you? You don't have to do that, because if you understand what the big picture is, you can just get on with it. It's more efficient. You make better decisions and you get a better outcome. That would be the strength in thinking like that. Saul says, 100% facts about the Hinge job market. What's worked for me so far was to get my resume right and posted in LinkedIn and Dice. I've never heard of Dice. Keep my profile public and get these random recruiters reaching out to me with these hidden jobs. Yeah, those are not hidden jobs. If there's a recruiter involved, it's not a hidden job. Saul says that's never even post. Okay, whatever. Alexis says, I've done all that. The issue is getting an interview. Okay, I guess you guys are talking amongst yourselves here. Tran says, between an apprenticeship in the new industry, I can complete my bachelor versus working a full-time job, doing the same I've done before, but not sure when I can get a bachelor. What do you think? I have no idea. I mean, how would I know what's right for you? I don't even know what your goals are. I don't even know what industry you're in. But here's what you can do. Okay, listen. Like, this is a very basic technique that you can use if you want to get some real insights into your career path and what options you have. Okay, and since we've been talking about LinkedIn, people are talking all about LinkedIn today. Here's what you can do. Okay, now, you may need LinkedIn Premium from this. I think you do, okay? Now, if you don't want to pay for LinkedIn Premium, that's fine. I think they still have the whole, like, free month of LinkedIn Premium. Like, they're desperate to, like, get people to buy LinkedIn Premium. So they're always giving it away for, like, here's the free trial of, LinkedIn Premium. So sign up for that and then just cancel before the end of the month so they don't charge you, and then you get it for free. Now, here's what I recommend, okay? Go and do some people searches. So for me, no, I won't use me as an example. Whatever your hometown is, like wherever you are, if you're located in a big city, you would limit your search to that city. So that's the geographic limits of your city, okay? Then in the search box, you're going to type in the role that you'd like to be in, okay? So, like not your next job, but some like future role. Like, what's your career ambition? To someday be in what role? To be the owner of a construction company? To be a master tradesperson? Like whatever that end goal is, that role, type that in to the search box, and you're going to be doing a people search, okay? So the results that come up are going to be individuals, and they're going to be individuals where that role is somewhere in their profile. So either they're in that role now, or they were previously in that role, okay? The thing you aspire to be. Now, do that search. Look at these results. These are all individuals. Look at all their profiles. See what their education is. If they all have a certain degree, or they all have a certain certificate or certain training, that would suggest that if you want to be in that role, that's probably a good thing for you to get, right? Then look at their experience. Did they all come up the same way? Like, you're essentially looking at their resume when you look at their profile. So you can see that they were in this job, and then they were in this job, and then they moved into the job that you want, right? So how did they get that? What did they do first? So if you look at all these people and you see a pattern, and you see that, okay, most of them, it really seems like for 10 years, they were in this role first. then maybe that's the role you should try and shoot for, right? If you want to get to the end goal, which is that big high position, right? So, it's a way to validate different educational credentials. Like, is this thing needed or not? Is it valued or not? Are people actually getting this out in the real world? Right? So that's one thing you could do. Another thing you can do is the opposite of that. Instead of looking up the role, you could look up what you have. Okay, so let's say you're getting a bachelor degree in marine biology from the University of Rangoon. Okay, that's what you've got, or that's what you're in, and you're gonna have in a year's time, right? So do a people search in your hometown. Like you can look at it in your entire country or whatever if you want, but just for convenience, look at it in your hometown and type in the search box the name of that degree. Okay, so Bachelor of Marine Biology, University of Rangoon, and then run the search and then look at the results. The results are going to be people where that degree shows up on their profile. So either they have the degree, they got it, or they're currently in school for it, right? Now look at what jobs they're in. Look at where they're working. That can give you an idea of what doors that having that degree opens for you. What are some of the options? Maybe some people are in academia. Okay, they become professors of marine biology or whatever. I don't know. Maybe other people are in the private sector. Maybe they're working in museums. Other people are working for private companies. They're in the private sector. They're doing some kind of research for product testing. To make sure something's safe to put in the ocean or something. I don't know. Like look at all the different options available. Now, if you're not really seeing that degree out there, there's not a lot of results. That might suggest that degree is not really out there that much. It's not this common thing, right? So you can do all these kinds of things, and it can yield all kinds of insights into what your next career move should be. It can open up ideas for jobs you should maybe apply for, things like this, right? You might even be able to see some big employers. If there's one company that employs 500 people that all have bachelors of marine biology from the University of Rangoon, they're just that sort of a company, it might make sense to apply there. Go down and talk to a person from the company, You could even reach out to these people and say, like do an informational interview and say like, listen, I'm just starting out. I see from your profile, you have that degree. You've had this glorious career in marine biology. Would I be able to meet with you and perhaps ask you some questions about the marine biology industry and where it's going and what your insights have been on it, or maybe advice for a young person starting out in the marine biology industry? Number one, you might learn something. Number two, you might get a connection that can really open some doors for you, right? So there's a lot of things you can do with LinkedIn, but I don't recommend using LinkedIn, by the way, to like just connect with recruiters and apply for posted jobs. I recommend using it for like all these other things that it's really useful for. See, this is networking, right? This is networking for introverts. It's using social networking to connect with people and opening doors. Now, where did I leave off here? Sorry, I went on a bit of a tangent there. I think that was Tran, right? Apprenticeship in industry, doing the same I've done before. Yeah, like so to get some insights into your career, right? What you could do, what options are available, things like this, what path you should go down. These kinds of queries can help you. And I do recommend you go down that, you do this, and then you reach out to some of these people that you find. A lot of them, they might not respond or they might say no or whatever, but a few of them will say yes. And then you've got like meetings, you're meeting people like that are in positions that you aspire to be in, or that work for employers that hire people with your skills. Like this is all really useful stuff to have. Anna W. says, can you advise what to do, how to react very politely when the connection on the call is breaking and it's not your fault? Like breaking, mean like breaking up, like the connection's poor. I had some I had this kind of problem. I was pushing to continue. Well, listen, if that happened to me, and first of all, hopefully I understand your question properly. If that happened to me, I would say, listen, it's a very bad connection. I apologize. I can't hear what you're saying, you know? And what I'd say, I try and do something where it's like, can I call you back? Or can you call me back? Like something like that. And just try and do that. I mean, that's about all you can do, really. You know, if you have been communicating with them over email, but you're on the phone with them, you could have your email out and then you could say, you know, like, I'm sorry, I'll call you back. And then you immediately send them an email and say, like, I'm very sorry. You know, it was a terrible connection. The call was dropped. Here's my phone number. Please call me back, or I'm attempting to call you now, or something like that. That's all I would do. Hopefully that helps. I'm not sure if that's what you're asking about, but if it is, hopefully that helps. You're welcome, ProSun. Hopefully that was useful. Saul says, thank you, sir, for all your gems. I look forward to purchasing your courses shortly. Well, great. I hope you get something out of it, and thank you for saying so. Nicole says, thank you for your concise wording. It was helpful. Okay, great. Good stuff. Well, it's good to get intelligent questions. You guys are asking some pretty good questions here, so you know, that's great to see, and hopefully it's useful. There are 40 people here. Thank you for being here. If you are between jobs right now, I want you to know you're awesome, okay? We always feel this tall when we're between jobs. Our self-esteem and our self-confidence just go right down the tubes. You know, it's all an illusion, okay? You are hireable. You are extremely employable. You are very valuable. And this situation is temporary. It doesn't feel temporary, but it is temporary. You're going to be okay. The more you know, the quicker you'll be able to find something. And the more you know, the better the thing that you find will be. Okay, so learn as much as you can. Get your advice, as I always say, get your advice from not just a single source, but like from multiple sources. Do your own research on stuff. Don't just accept people's opinions on things. You know, and then try things. Step out of your comfort zone a little and try things just in a kind of controlled kind of way. There's a lot of things you can do with just social networking, things like LinkedIn and stuff, that don't involve applying for jobs, don't involve connecting with recruiters, stuff beyond it. Aaron says, I think my weakness is a lack of focus, and it's coming across in my applications. How did you know recruitment was right for you? Completely appreciate this. Could be hard to answer. Okay, so are you asking me, or you're saying that's like a question you're being asked? Are you in recruitment? Yeah, if you could help explain that, if I can understand your question fully, Aaron, I'll be happy to answer. If you could just explain a bit more. I'm glad, Anna. I'm glad that helped. That's good. I didn't know if I understood your question properly, but hopefully that was useful. I'm asking you personally. Okay, well, I've never been in recruitment. I'm not a recruiter. I've been a CEO, and I've had to hire people, and I've hired recruiters, and more recently, like in the last 5 years, well, slightly more than 5 years ago, ending in 2021. I was asked to come back and teach in university and business school to teach recruiters as part of the HR program in the business program. So that's where I'm coming from. That's actually how my YouTube channel started, because I was answering questions for these HR students, and I was getting so tired of like answering the same questions over and over and over again that I just decided to start making videos, post them, and then send the students to the videos so I wouldn't have to explain it like for the 30th time. So that's how I got into it. So hopefully that makes sense. Now, your question here, I think my weakness is a lack of focus and it's coming across in applications. I don't see what that's got to do with how did you know recruitment was right for you. Completely appreciate this can be hard to answer. Like the lack of focus thing. Maybe that's what you're talking about. You have a question, then you ask me a question, and then you say, it's hard, and I don't know what you're referring to. So maybe, is this the lack of focus thing? Possibly. It's all good, Aaron. It's all good. Listen, with regard to the weakness question, when they ask you, what is your weakness? Remember, that question is primarily a trap. And it's a really good thing to want to be open and honest with the recruiter when they ask you questions about you. It's a very good thing. The problem is that if you're a little too honest and a little too forthcoming, especially about your flaws, that can really work against you because you're making you're making a first impression in a job interview. What would you think of a person that you don't know, you're just meeting them for the first time, but the first thing out of their mouth is, oh, I'm no good at this, and I got a problem with this, and I've gotten in trouble before for doing this. What's your opinion of that person now? Probably not very good. Do you think oh, I'm going to put you in charge of, this valuable thing that I have here? You usually don't think like that, right? So that's the problem with this situation. You want to be honest and you want to explain some legitimate issues that you've had to encounter, and maybe you haven't yet figured out the perfect way of handling it or something, but it's a fascinating topic and you're honestly looking to improve yourself and learn how you would handle that, because in the past you've tried to and it hasn't gone perfectly, so it would be great to get into it with these people. But the problem is that what you're really doing in a job interview is you're actually giving a sales pitch. That's what it really is. They're talking to 10 people or 6 people or whatever it is. You're one of them. Basically, you're there to say, listen, you need to hire me. You need to forget about all the other people you're talking to and hire me. And here's why, That's really what you're there to do. It isn't like a counseling session. So it's hard to remember that, because when they ask these questions, we have a tendency to want to just answer fully and honestly. And sometimes your reward for that is that they just eliminate you, So that's the problem. Aaron says, what I meant was a lack of career focus. I'm applying to several different types of jobs, not knowing what we're doing. Listen, Aaron, I sympathize entirely. I empathize with that because, you're just a capable person. You can do more than one thing, That's a sign of being, pretty damn valuable and talented and employable. Whatever they throw at you, you probably can deal with. You don't just have one skill. You have a broad skill set, right? I was watching a YouTube video earlier today, and it was some guy building a dam. He's building a concrete dam across a river. And I was thinking man, I've done some concrete work in my time, just not as my job or anything, but just for fun. I've done construction projects and things for fun. And it's I remember thinking man, I should do another one. It's so fun doing that stuff, And it's I always get that. I think man, I should do more concrete work. Or I saw another thing, somebody's building a little amplifier with electronics. I was man, I can do that. Why don't I do more of that? It's you can do more than one thing. You're a talented person. So depending on what people are looking for, you can speak to it, right? You have more than one skill. Now, the problem is that in the post-to-job market, when you're talking to a recruiter, and this is a typical archetype recruiter, what they're looking for is someone who's lived their entire life just to do that job, right? They're not looking for generalists. They're looking for someone that's specialized in doing that thing. And they aspire to do that thing, and that's all their aspirations, right? And unfortunately, it means that generalists like you and me and many other talented people, you don't quite fit with that because you can do many things, and you have done many things, So you have to sort of create this idealized version of yourself in your application and in your interviews where it's almost like you try and reframe who you are to show that you live to do this one thing, right? It can be hard. Now, what I recommend is always usually the same thing. You will probably do better talking to a hiring manager than you will to a recruiter, okay? Most people do, actually. Most people would love to talk to a hiring manager and not a recruiter, because hiring managers, they care more about like who you are. They care about what your ideas are about the role, technicalities of it. If you do an informational interview with a hiring manager and you ask them all these questions about this particular thing, I don't know if you mention a specific thing here. No, you just say several different types of jobs. But let's say it's one of those types of jobs, and you're asking them about that industry, you're asking them about their situation, how they do things. You could speak to it, and just by the questions you would ask and the things you would say, they'd be able to tell that you know your stuff and you can handle that job. You know what I mean? The fact that you can do 50 other things doesn't enter into it, right? They care about, wow, you seem like you could do this. You seem to have a good head on your shoulders. You seem all the other things. All you got to do is show all the other things. You're professional. You're articulate. You're obviously interested, or you wouldn't be here. You know what I mean? So if you don't have a lot of focus, that can be a good thing, because that means that you have so many options around you. You could do so many different things for so many different employers, but you have a ton of options. And where you would be able to exploit that is by doing direct outreach. Okay. Just for everybody else listening, I don't know if you're interested in this, Aaron, but certainly for everybody else, if this is kind of striking a chord with you, this is like a bit of who you are. Check out that video I did called How Successful People Get Jobs. It's linked in the description. That shows you how to do what I'm suggesting, where you can get in front of a ton of hiring managers and you could just have conversations about, their needs and their roles. And if you can speak to a lot of different things, that can really open up a lot of doors. So, but it's an entirely different thing than applying for a lot of jobs, because the jobs you apply for, A, they're posted publicly, B, you're going through a recruiter who doesn't think this way, C, they're looking for more of a specialist rather than a generalist, right? And in speaking to hiring managers, you can actually find out more about kind of what they're sort of looking for. It's maybe not pinned down precisely yet. I mean, I've done that, where I've brought sort of what I can do to a lot of jobs, and that's the best way to get hired, because you come into the role and you make the role your own, right? You have a lot of skills, and you choose. You don't just step into a role that's entirely pre-decided. You step into a role where you have to decide how you're going to do it. So you bring in a lot of your own skills for that. Anyway, I don't know if that rambling trip to nowhere really helped you, but if nothing else, check out that video I have linked in the description box of this live stream, right below. And if you want to go deeper, and this is kind of what you're interested in learning, if you don't know any of this stuff, but you want to learn it all and how to do it, check out that course. That's where I put all that stuff. Okay, it's linked in the description box below. Yeah, generalists don't get enough praise, certainly by recruiters, because recruiters by definition are not looking for generalists. So they make it feel like generalists are, it's like it's bad for you to be a generalist, Aaron says, I needed to hear that today. Thank you. Recently, I've been going to job fairs instead of applying online and found hiring managers to be much easier. Yes, because you see, the job originates with the hiring manager, right? If you're a manager, say you're the head of a department of engineers, the engineering department, right, in a company, and you're the head of the engineering department. So you decide, okay, we have so much work, we're going to need to hire another engineer, permanent, full-time, because we have too much jobs coming in. too much demand. We don't have, I've been trying to run the place with overtime, but even that's really, it's not sustainable. And, we're still maxed out. We need to hire another permanent engineer. So that's the engineering manager that comes to that conclusion, right? They ask their bosses, they say, look, I need to hire another guy or another person. Do we have that in the budget? They say, sure, yeah, go ahead. You're going to offer them this much standard amount. Yeah, that's what I'm going to do. Okay, we'll just fill in the form, send it to me this afternoon, and then, go and hire the next person. So they go, okay, great. So now I got to hire someone. Now they're an engineering manager. They have to deal with engineering, the designs and managing this team, right? They don't have extra time to go and sit in job interviews, write job descriptions, all this kind of stuff. So one way or another, they get the services of a recruiter. The recruiter is someone they hire. Either it's an internal person or you can hire an external recruiter. That's how a lot of smaller companies do it. That's how I did it. And, they do all the grunt work. It's like you say, okay, listen, here, I want to hire an engineer. They need to have this degree. They need to have this, maybe say 2 years experience, whatever. Go get me some candidates that have all of those. You coordinate the interviews, set up the interviews. You do an initial route, like a filter. I'm not interested in talking to people that don't understand what the job is, that are not engineers, that got fired from every job they ever had. Give me some good quality candidates. When you've filtered them, set up the job interviews. Let me know where they are. I'll attend, and then I'll make a final decision with you. Right? So that's the process. So the recruiter is very much a grunt. They have to, they're given a list of requirements by a hiring manager, and their job is to go out and find a bunch of qualified candidates that have every single one of those. That's what they have to do. In reality, they're given here are the hard requirements and here are the nice to haves, right? And that's what they do. They set up the meetings and they do all the screenings and they do the background checks and they check references and blah, 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 all that grunt work. The job originated with the hiring manager. Now, if you could talk to the hiring manager, imagine if, right at the time when the hiring manager realized I need to hire another engineer, and let's pretend you're a fully qualified engineer, and you sent a message to that hiring manager saying, hey, I'm here. I can do this. I solve this problem. And if ever you're looking for a fully qualified engineer, let me know because I'd love to work for your company. I know you guys do this particular type of work. I think that's very exciting. I live very close by. Let me know if ever you're hiring. Thanks and have a great day. Imagine if that landed in the hiring manager's lap right at that time, coincidentally, right? They would probably want to just bring you in. They'd probably respond, hey, are you free? Do you want to grab a coffee? I might have something, I'm not sure. Right? Let's maybe talk about it. Something like that. Right? So that's the idea behind it. That's how you tap the hidden job market before the job even gets posted. Right? But the hiring manager knows they have to hire another person. Right? They don't want to deal with recruiters. They don't want to deal with hiring. It's yet another chore that they don't have time for. Right? First they think, do I know anybody? Then they think, is there some internal candidate I can move up or move sideways into this role that I know? They're tried and true. And then they think, okay, I'm going to go talk to HR. Do they have any resumes on file of fully qualified engineers that want to work here that we've already spoken to? They're the runners up for some other job, but they'd be good for this one. No? Okay. Then we have to post it, right? But during that process, you land in their lap. Maybe you do an informational interview with them, right? So they meet you and they see that you're professional, you're easy to deal with, you're charismatic, you got great communication skills, you know your stuff they can tell by the conversation. You can get in there. That's a very popular way of tapping the hidden job market, right? They hired you. Why not? Aaron says, my background is in bioinformatics. I don't even know what that is. Is that like fingerprints and stuff like that? And biochemistry, I know what that is. But I have done jobs in software and analytics and now looking for medicine and statistics. statistician's career, so I understand what you meant by... Yeah, absolutely. It seems like there's no place for you because you've worked across all these different fields. Hello, that's me. I've worked across 5 industries. The thing that helped me, and maybe this applies to you or maybe not, maybe it doesn't, but I'll say it anyway, is like, the cool thing about being in that situation is that if you work across these industries, you see people over here struggling with a problem they don't know how to solve. But unbeknownst to them, that exact problem has been solved years ago in this other industry. And if you've seen both, where not many people see both, you can transplant that solution from where you saw it used into this new area where they're struggling to solve it, and you look like a genius. Everybody thinks you're like amazing, and you're standing on the shoulders of giants, right? To use a cliche. You just borrowed something you saw from over here, you applied it here, bam. That kind of cross-pollination. You can deliver that to companies because you've been in that position where you've worked across different industries, especially ones that don't often, overlap. They don't often talk to each other. So that's what helped me in that situation. So Aaron says, really appreciate the advice. So, okay, great. So anyway, the good news, Aaron, is that there's a lot more to getting a job than recruiters and posted jobs. There's a lot more. There's a whole universe out there. Now, if people don't believe me, you probably all have family members that, you probably know you have a family member that got a job, not by applying cold to a company, but through some personal connection. Maybe they had an ex-coworker of theirs that went to that company, and they got hired at that company too by reaching out to that ex-coworker, right? Or some version of it, right? Some version of networking, right? Some people apply in person. 500 people applied online, but one person applies in person. They end up talking to the hiring manager. They say, can I speak to the hiring manager? Can I speak to this individual? And they actually get a meeting with that individual, and they're the one that gets hired. Why? Because of all the 501 applicants, that's the only one where they've had a sample of who you are, what you're like to deal with. You've already demonstrated how passionate you are about working in that job because you went to great lengths to go down there and meet them. Like, it's not about talking about yourself. It's about demonstrating, right? If you have a conversation with the hiring manager and you show that you know your stuff, you're professional, you're charismatic, and you're easy to deal with, you're already head and shoulders above every other candidate that just applied and they're just a resume, right? As far as the hiring manager is concerned. Prime says, I did a tech job test, a tech job test where it has stuff that were not mentioned on the job post. It was a junior position, but they were asking way more advanced stuff than statistician. Okay, so AI, junior developer, and bunch of other stuff. So I used an AI to do it, but felt a bit bad about it. So they invited me for an interview, and I plan on learning the topics that were on the test. Also, they still insisted it's a junior role. Okay. This is the kind of crap we have to put up with when going through recruiters and stuff, because this is, just like those contradictions, like saying it's a junior role, and then they ask you like really advanced stuff. It's like, well, obviously, it's not a junior role. If you're expecting people to answer this, it's not a junior role. Like, that's pretty clear, right? That's very similar to what they did in education when AI first show up, like things like ChatGPT. You can use AI to cheat on a test, as it were. But what the fix were they would call you in person and get you to do a presentation. And then ask you questions to your face live, right? that was the test, so that, if they want to verify that you didn't use AI tools or anything like that, and it's not always AI tools. You can cheat in a variety of different ways. You know what I mean? Excuse me. But that was the way that they try and counter those things. Is the countermeasure is to get you to come and answer the questions in person, right? It's harder to fake that. It's harder to cheat at that. How should I handle the situation? They would try to make me do senior stuff while paying junior salary. Yeah, that's always, yeah. Now listen, look, the reality is that there are no guarantees and there's always risk, right? So you go for a job and then you see them doing something that you interpret as a red flag, right? And already you're off to a bad start in this one. If they're saying it's a junior role and then they're asking you very advanced things, right? So there's obviously a disconnect there. Now, if you want the job, because you're going through this process, you have no choice to play by their rules, right? This is their process. This is how they've said, we're hiring for this role. Here's our process. You apply to us. We ask you questions. You then answer. Then we decide, right? You have to play by their rules, okay? Now, you have to decide something very simple. Do you want to persist with this job, or are you ready to bail now? Okay. What I would do is I would try and, depending on what options you have available for you, like if you've just received 3 job offers yesterday for like other companies, then you probably don't need to persist with this one, especially with the red flags, right? But in the absence of that, if this is the best lead you have right now, what I would do is I would probably persist with this, try and get the job. Just try and get it. Because if you don't get the job, none of this matters, right? So try and get it. And then once they give you an offer, then you can decide what you're going to ask for and what you're going to do. Okay? By the offer stage, it should be much clearer what the role is officially and what your duties are officially, and then you see what you're up against. And then you determine if you're going to ask for more than they're offering or what you're going to do. Okay? So that's how I would handle that, right? You're right. These are some red flags. It could turn out to be a dud, but they're not so bad that there can't be a good job at the end of this. It may not be highly likely, but it's certainly possible. So I would pursue it. Nicole says, thank you for that. Your response to Aaron was helpful for me as well, having a very diverse job background from design, building, business development, the arts, and more. I didn't know how to discuss it. Yeah, you know what, Nicole? You're in a lot more common situation than you think. A lot of people are generalists. You know what I mean? I'm a generalist. I'm proud of it. We can make that work. We're just very practical. And if for no other, if you had to say sort of one thing that it can do, is that it means that in a role that I take, you can usually throw a lot of miscellaneous duties at me and I'll be able to handle them. I'm used to handling a diverse, array of different tasks and different types of things. I've got a very broad skill set. I can speak to a lot of different things that need to be done, whether it's, like you said, whether it's sort of on the marketing side, business development side, whether it's on the operations side, whether it's more content related, like you've got stuff in the arts and things like this. And the advantage that you have is that you understand how all those things fit together, what their roles are. The problem with specialists sometimes is that they can get tunnel vision. You see that in like operations, where people who have only ever been in operations in their lives, they've never seen anything other than operations. They don't understand marketing. They don't understand sales. They clearly don't understand like the value proposition to the customer. So they demand like big budgets and like totally unrealistic things that people that are a little higher up, they see like, oh, that's just totally unrealistic. This person is asking for ridiculous things, right? I can't take any of their requests seriously because they're clearly totally out to lunch here, you know? Whereas a generalist who has done sales maybe, or done marketing, but yet they're in a role in operations, they understand how operations fits into the larger business. They understand its role and they understand its limits, you know? So you might have that perspective, whereas a specialist may not, right? So if ever they ask you, like a hiring manager or something like that asks you, you know, like, you know, do you feel that, you know, being sort of a generalist is kind of like a liability? You can say something like that. It's the most obvious thing. You know, I mean, how awesome is it to have like an operations person that fully understands, you know, the marketing side of things? You would be able to do your job in operations a lot better. You'd be able to do it in such a way that it gives the marketing people exactly what they need to succeed. Or you understand maybe the finance side of it, the accounting and finance side, the money side of it. You know, it's like, yeah, I work here, but I also understand this and this and this, everything ancillary to it. You know, those make the best employees. You will have the best judgment of anyone in your department with those skills. Where did I leave off? Okay, I think I was dealing with Prime. So Aaron says, really appreciate the. You're welcome, Aaron. I'm glad that helped. Okay, so Prime's thing, that was the AI job. How should I handle the situation? Would they try to make me do senior stuff while paying me? Yes. We talked about that. What I think would happen. It looks like a big company, so I thought they were serious. Is offering stage when they send you the okay, so the offer stage is when they've sent you an offer. So if they've sent you a draft employment contract, right? They said like you agreed to do this job, and we agree to pay you this amount in this way. That's an offer, right? So if you've got that in your hand, that's when you can look at this a bit more seriously and decide whether this is for you or not. Now, if it's a big company, okay, just be aware that, you know, it has been known that the job that you get at the bottom, you know, your first job in that organization might not be that great, but it's a stepping stone. Once you're on the inside, it's a stepping stone to do a lot of things that are much better. Okay? So, you know, like they hire people that they don't know. They hire strangers. They hire external candidates that they don't really know to do all the low-level stuff. And then like some people will just leave. Others will stick it out. Others will prove themselves and they'll move up, right? In some large organizations, that's how it works. Not all of them, but some of them. Now, if you do a bit of research on the company, you can find out if that's the case. Okay? You know, do like some web searches. Try and do some research on the company. Find out what the employees are saying about the company. Go on LinkedIn. Try and like look at all the people in the company. You know, this kind of stuff. You know, like for example, look at people in the location that you're going to work and see if they all have the same degree or they all have the same background and what level they're at. You can get hints at like how it works. If you have people that are staying for a long time in the company and they're moving up, they've had a lot of roles in that organization, that suggests there's a lot of opportunities for advancement. So you get this job, it might be just getting your foot in the door. It's not that great, but then you start moving up and then it really starts to pay off. So, you know, do your research on the company and see if that's maybe what's going on, because a lot of large organizations, you have that. Not all of them, but a lot of them you do. So just keep that in mind, right? This could be a stepping stone to something else. If you're in this role for like 1 year, 2 years, but then you move up, it might be worth it, depending on the details, to put up with something less than perfect if it means that you get to move up into much better roles that pay you a lot more and they're a lot better. Okay, if it's a big company, they might have a lot of opportunities. Now, if you're If it's a big company, but you're stuck in a small branch office, I know what that feels like. It's like, yes, you're technically part of a big company, but like there's only 12 employees at your location or something. Then the opportunities for advancement might not be there unless you're willing to relocate and things like this. And you're also away from the big decision makers. You're away from head office. So it's hard to be visible, put it that way. There's a lot of factors here. I'd pursue it, see what their offer is, and then make a decision. Okay, I'm going to wind down the stream. I actually have another stream that's starting in about 10 minutes on this channel. So I'm actually going to be back in 10 minutes on a different stream. So there are 40 people here. Thank you for joining me today. You're awesome. And come back in 10 minutes if you want to continue. We're going to be talking about more of the real world sort of ugliness and imperfections of job search on this channel in 10 minutes. I'll see you guys then. Okay, take care.